Hey friends, it's Tracy. Today I have 30 plus project DIYs to share with you that contain something to do with country rustic pumpkins. Guys, I love this. This is so my heart. And you know, in my videos, I jam pack a lot of stuff into them. So I will have the timestamps of the skip through videos that you can, find in the description box below if you would like to, and move on to the next one. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started and let me share what I have prepared for you today. Okay, so I have just some white paint and a liner brush, as well as a fine Sharpie marker and an ultra fine Sharpie marker. Those are my preferences. And so what I like to do is just kind of just go around, and I'm not being very perfect. I just don't care if my lines are touching, and just kind of go around and just doodle up around, just squiggling and just making some outlines of different parts of the sign. So I'm liking this look with my fine Sharpie marker. So then next I will take my liner brush and some white acrylic paint and just go along everything just to give it some white highlights. I will also put some highlights on the letters. Next, I'm going to splatter paint my project. I make sure that my area is covered because splattering paint does get messy and it does go everywhere. So I usually start with black first. I'm just using a stiff stencil brush as well as a stick, and I am dipping my brush in the paint, and then I'm running the stick across the bristles, like the stick toward my body, and so that the paint will project onto my project. I do black, and then I go back and I do white. I make sure that my brush is clean, or I use a different stiff brush. And then once my sign is all dry, I do give a coat of this varnish. This is my favorite varnish. I have been getting some questions about that. Yes, I do seal all of my painted projects, and this is the varnish that I have been using for years. So I needed something cute for my pumpkins to go on. So I had this base that I had done a couple of months ago that I never did anything with. And what I did is I took 2 of the 21-inch candy canes that Dollar Tree used to have, and I just turned them around just to make a oval. And I had seen this in the Facebook wreath groups, and I thought it is so cute because you can make swags out of them. Anyway, so what I did is I just put on my mesh like I usually do in the bundles with the burlap and the snowball mesh. And I cut my mesh at 12 inches and I just put them on this, this candy cane oval frame and, just with my pipe cleaners, and I put 25 bundles on this, on this oval, 25 bundles. And then I went back with the orange and the white 12-inch mesh, and I put 11 bundles to go around this. And then I am going to put on some cute fall ribbon. Again, I used 25 of the burlap bundles and 11 of the orange and white bundles. I connected my candy cane frames just with black zip ties. Now we're going to move on to the cute fall ribbon. I cut these at 13 inches. They all came from Hobby Lobby. And then I layered them like this. I use my tiny attacher because it puts a tiny staple in there. But if you want to do it like this and use a regular staple, go right ahead. I just gather it in the middle, and I don't even know that staple is there, so that's why I advocate for the little tiny attacher. These are my next bundle of ribbon that I'm using. They're all cut at 13 inches as well, and so then I just make an X pattern, and then I just put one on top. These right here, the flat ones are cut at 13 inches, and then I made some bows. Those bows are cut at 28 inches, and then I just made like 3-inch loops and stapled it in the middle. And I'm just going to put the pumpkin burlap and the plaid in an X pattern, and then I will put the bow in the middle. I'm also using some raffia in this wreath, and so I just did like just a loop of it, and then I just took extra pipe cleaner and just tied that off, and then that is what I'm going to put into all of the orange with the burlap. I'm going to put those in all of the ties. And so then I just did a tic-tac-toe pattern. I have 3 sets of ribbon, so I just went around this whole wreath and just kind of alternated them to make them look really pretty. And just by putting in a bit of raffia in one of those sets of ribbons, out of the 3 I only put the raffia in the one, and it just looks really pretty. Now this sign is a cardboard sign, so I just used my crocodile to put some holes in it and just use some of my wire that I like to get from the Dollar Tree to secure it and attach it to the frame so that everything is nice and secure. I also added in some sprigs of the pip berries that I like to get from Hobby Lobby, and this fall swag wreath is complete. Okay, so what I started with is a 12 by 14 inch canvas, and I just painted it brown, and then I'm going to use some large craft sticks. I had just used my antique wax to stain those to give them some color, and then I cut them down just with my scissors to make out a frame. So I'm actually going to be making a reverse canvas. So I painted around the edges, and then the back, I just painted that solid. And then on the inside, that's when I'm going to put the scrapbook paper for my background. Now, before I did that, I wanted to paint my sign, or to hand letter my sign. And so I'm using one of these ragged jagged signs from Hobby Lobby. They're the Woodpile brand. I've already painted it with buttermilk paint, and then I shaded it and doodled it with my black marker. I'm going to use a 5M Posca pen in black, and that is what I'm just going to hand letter thankful and blessed. So for my frame, I have this scrapbook paper. I got this from Hobby Lobby, and I've already cut it down to size where it fits into the canvas. It just slides right underneath that wood frame. And I'm not going to tape it, glue it, or anything because it just kind of fits snugly in there like that. I just, since this looks like a old fence, I had lined up, I had to use 2 pieces of paper since this is a 12 by 14 frame because it wasn't, long enough. So I had to line it up and trim it off just to make sure that it all coincide, and just did the, so the lines would be correct. And then what I'm sharing here is I have these large craft sticks that I got from Walmart, and I had just taken my antique wax and a baby wipe and just stained them. And so I cut them down to size, and just a tip to get the sticks to lay correctly. Once I laid them out, then I put in numbers on the back so that I knew exactly how everything should lay out together. So I'm just measuring off here and just trimming it off with my scissors, and just kind of, then I'm going to hot glue this down to make the frame of this rustic pumpkin, decor piece. So then for my pumpkin, I'm using one of the pumpkin forms from the Dollar Tree. The orange and white check paper is from that paper pad that I picked up from Hobby Lobby, and so I just cut that out. I traced my paper on the front side because I wanted it to be straight. I did not want my check to be off or crooked, so I do this sometimes when I want my checks to be I don't want it to be crooked. So I'm just using a school glue stick just to attach the paper down. A lot of people use Mod Podge or some kind of adhesive tape, glue, that kind of thing. And so then I'm just taking my sanding sponge just to go around the edges, just to give it a rustic edge, as well as cut off any of the extra paper that may be hanging over. And so then I'm using my vintage photo distress ink and my finger dauber, just going around and giving it some distress color. I also give it the ribs of the pumpkin, just like that. I'm taking my fine Sharpie marker and just going around and doing some doodling, because you know that I like to do that. And then for the stem, I just took some burlap that I got from the Dollar Tree. And that little pink tool is a masking tool. You can find those at the Dollar Tree in the makeup section. And so then now what I want to do, I'm just taking my ivory Posca pen and just going around and giving just a highlight to each of the letters, or the happy dots. Then I take my black fine marker and just go around and kind of give that some highlight as well. The beauty is in the details. That's what I always say. So then now I'm setting up my, I'm going to do some paint splattering. And so I make sure that my area is covered, because my paint splatter does go, on the table and that kind of thing. And so I just take my stiff brush and my stick, go over that just to give it the black paint splatter. And so then now what I'm doing is I'm just taking that distress ink and just going around the edges of the sticks, because I wanted to do that before I glued it down, but I forgot to do that. So then now I have this fine Excelsior that I find at Joann's craft store. And I'm going to put that down in the bottom like that, where it gives a bit of whimsy. It also adds like some filler for some of my items to stick to. So then for my pumpkin, I just glue that down. So then now I'm just taking some different trims that, you know, that I have, and I'm going to make a messy bow and just kind of cut some of those trims off. I have some burlap, some different trims that I got from Walmart and Dollar Tree, Hobby Lobby, that kind of thing. And I just cut them off, and then I just lay them out in like a X pattern. I'm also using some pip berries, because all of my country projects have some pip berries. I just took some raffia and just tied it around the stem of the pumpkin. Then this paper covered wire is actually from the pip berries. I had taken the pip berries off. They're just wired on to this wire, and so it's too good to throw away, so I'm just using it for the tendrils of my pumpkin. I'm just going around and just twisting it, and then I will attach my bow to the top of my pumpkin. Just using a little hole punch, like in the jewelry section. That's where I find that, where you can just punch holes in these thin wood pieces or wood signs from the Dollar Tree. And so then I just use my pipe cleaner and thread it through that hole. I was using my paper piercer to make that hole just a little bit bigger so that my pipe cleaner would go through there. And so then now I'm just making a bow with my raffia. Then trim everything off. Kind of struggling with this wire, and I end up actually turning it over, and it kind of laid a little bit better. So then now I'm just kind of twisting all that down. Then I have some fall sunflowers and some fall greenery thing, and that's what I'm going to glue to the bottom of the sign or my decor piece. I have some of these frosted branches from the Dollar Tree that I'm just trimming off and just putting sticks of those in to my decor. I really think that it adds just that rustic touch to it as well. And for my finished sign, what I did is I used my fan brush and some orange paint just to give a little bit of orange to my sign, just to give it some more color. Now, I was totally inspired to create some of these for myself when I saw a fellow YouTuber create some for her home. I will leave a link to her video below because I want to give credit where credit is due. This is not my idea. I just made it my own as far as embellishments and everything that I've added. These are the 2 pumpkins that I started with. These are from the Dollar Tree, but you're going to need 2 of the pumpkins that are on the stands. And then I used 2 of these I Am Thankful pumpkins. Actually, you're going to need 3, but that is another story, so stay tuned. And this is the scrapbook paper that I chose to use. All of it is from Hobby Lobby. To start on the pumpkins, I just took them off of the little wooden stand. I set that to the side because we're going to need that. And then I removed any embellishments as far as like the little sunflower and then the raffia bow as well. Now on these pumpkins, I removed the metal leaf, the raffia, and then I just cut off the jute because I'm not going to need that. And then what I did is I just traced I figured out my patterns of paper that I wanted for each pumpkin, and then I just traced it and then cut it out with scissors. Then I took some Mod Podge and I put Mod Podge all over the front of the pumpkin as well as the paper, and then I just smooth that on with my roller, and then I got my squeegee and I squeezed out tried to get out some of that Mod Podge where my pumpkins were smooth. The squeegee works really good. Just remember to get all on the edges. That really helps. If there is any of the little paper on the edges, I just took my little sanding tool and just sanded off any of that if the edges bother you. And then I just took my tack cloth and just wiped them, and the tack cloth just gets off little particles. And then now I am inking the edges just with some little brown ink. I think that it gives it a rustic feel, so that's what I'm doing, just inking around those edges. Okay, for the stem of the pumpkin, I've decided to use these part of these burlap leaves from the Dollar Tree, and just cutting them apart until I get the shape that I want to be the stem of the pumpkin. And then to add a little bit more definition, I am just taking my ultrafine Sharpie marker and taking just doodling around the pumpkin, just giving it some lines and just some doodles because that's what I like to do. Now I am going to build my pumpkin, and so I'm just using my Rapid Fuse all-purpose adhesive, and it's kind of like super glue. It dries really fast, and so it's going to hold this really good. And so I am just making sure that that is really glued there together. And then now I'm going to put some leaves on there. I put some wire. I made like a curly stem, and just building it up with just different ribbons, burlap, cording that I get in the jewelry section. It looks really cute on these rustic pumpkins, just really, really cute. Okay guys, let's take a moment and look back at our work. These two turned out perfect, aren't they? They're just so fun and beautiful. And then now let's look at these. Oh my gosh. Yes, I do mess up, guys, and I chose not to edit this out because I want to show you if something like this happens to you where you get it off center, how you can fix it and your project is saved. So I am using one more pumpkin from the Dollar Tree, and I am going to use this orange polka dotted paper, and I'm going to do everything that I've done before. I will just add a third pumpkin to that one set. And actually, I think my mess up, I think I like that one better. So there are options. So I'm just kind of holding it up here, just trying to figure out how I want it. Since those two pumpkins are the same from the Dollar Tree, I'm trying to figure out how I want to tilt it so that it kind of looks a little bit different. And then once I figure that out, then I go ahead and glue those all together. And my mess up turned into something really cute because I actually like it a lot better with the three pumpkins. So that's great, a great option for us. Anyway, so now I'm just going to add some more leaves and ribbon and stems and just all kind of goodness. Now I am just adding some Spanish moss to finish off this little rustic pumpkins. It really kind of adds some filler and it just kind of finishes off that bottom. And then now I'm just snipping off some little flowers from the Dollar Tree that I got recently, and just adding those to the bottom of this little pumpkin stand. And then I also added some orange pip berries. That just makes my little old heart just happy. My little country heart, just pip berries just make me so happy. Anyway, so this is a great way to make some pumpkin decor. Now you can add, different embellishments, different amounts of pumpkins, but I really think that my mess up turned into a project that I am displaying for years to come. Using 3 of these wooden little boxes. They have pumpkins on them and they are from the Dollar Tree. And the orange I'm using is this Canyon Orange. It is an Americana brand, but I just pulled it out of my paints. And I just gave each one of them a coat all the way around, inside and the outside of this orange paint. Then I will shade on both sides of the pumpkins because, as you can see from the picture, I wanted to make it where you can see it from both sides. And so to shade, I just use my flat paintbrush. I dip half of my brush in paint, the other half in clean water. I blend on a paper towel, and then I go around the edges, and then to make the dimensions of the pumpkin to make it look really cute. I will take my little thin paintbrush and I will make some squigglies, some doodles. This is what I like to do for my projects. And then I'll go back and I will give each pumpkin some paint splatters by using my stencil brush and some black paint. I use a wooden toothpick or a stick. You can also use a toothbrush if you would like to do this. A lot of my friends say that they use the stiff toothbrush. That is totally good, but I just you need something stiff so that you can, when you put your paint on your brush, that you can run your stick across it and it will splatter. The beauty is in the details for me, and I'm just using my fine Sharpie marker, just going around each of the pumpkins just to make it pop and look so cute. Next, I am just going to put a clear gloss of varnish on it because that's what I like to do. It's a personal preference of the varnish that I like to do. Next, I'm showing you here, this is what I'm going to use for the stems. I just am taking some burlap from the Dollar Tree and I just cut the width in half, and then I just glued the burlap around the stem and make it look ratted and tattered. And anyway, this mask little tool, I got it at the Dollar Tree in the makeup section, and that helps with holding some hot glue down. I did show you that I did have my pink fingertips, and but I just recently got this masking tool, not masking, mask tool. I guess this looks like a little spatula, and it really helps with holding some of that stuff down, like if you need to get in, somewhere. And so I got that over at the Dollar Tree in the makeup section. So then now what I'm doing, I'm just cutting the burlap and just kind of wrapping it around over on each other, on itself, and that's going to be the stem of my pumpkin. I just kind of slipped the pumpkins together where they kind of, if like they fit like a puzzle. That's just what I was just kind of thinking when I was doing it. And then I just hot glued those down so that they would all stay together. And then I'm going to use this pipberry garland. This is from the Dollar Tree, just oh so cute and speaks to my heart. And so I'm just cutting off pieces of that, just twisting it around my finger, and just adding it to the pumpkin to kind of simulate some tendrils for each of the pumpkins. For the signs of the pumpkins, I just have two of these small little blocks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to take off the sides. And at first I was cutting them, and then that didn't work out too good, so then I kind of like tore them like paper. I kind of had to work with them with my scissors. Honestly, probably a box cutter works the best because I had like a light bulb moment what came on, and it's like this is way too hard. I'm making it more difficult on myself. So I almost had there you could see that I got my box cutter. I'm like, let me see if this works. And so I just took my box cutter and cut it. I'm like, oh yes, that cuts like butter. So if you were to, just for reference, if you want to cut some of these signs off of the front of those little boxes, use your box cutter. So, the signs were a little too white. So I took my Tim Holtz Distress ink. This is in the color Vintage Photo. And I just took a little sponge. Those are in the scrapbooking sections. They just fit on my finger. And I just go over the sign just to add some distressing so that it wasn't quite as white. And now I'm using my ultrafine Sharpie marker and just going around just to bring out and enhance the sign and give it a little dimension. I love the way that the ink and the extra marker just really brings out the pumpkins, and just really brings out the sign itself. And then I will add some splattering by doing my same technique of just using just doing black, and then I will go over it. I usually use a different stencil brush. Then I'll go back over it with white. Okay, so then to adhere the signs, what I did is I just glue them right in the front, and they just fit very nicely in these 3 pumpkins. And so once I put my flowers in, you'll be able to see both of, this from both sides. I like to use Excelsior for projects like this. It provides a filler and also some wispiness. And so then these are the flowers that I am using. I chose not to hot glue or glue the flowers into my little arrangement so that I could use them again if I wanted to. The eucalyptus came from Hobby Lobby. The daisies came from Hobby Lobby as well. And the hop bushes came from the Dollar Tree. Did someone say pip berries? Yes, that was me. These orange and white pip berries are from Hobby Lobby in the fall section. I just love them so much, and it just adds just the finishing touch to this little pumpkin box. Okay, the other day my husband was cleaning out his shop. He had these 2x4s and 2x6s, and he was like, "Hey, can you do anything with these?" And I'm like, "Yeah, don't you be throwing them out." Anyway, so I went to Pinterest, looking around to see some scrap wood ideas. I ran across this pin, and I will have it linked below for my inspiration. I am an advocate for community over competition, to kind of let you know where I got my inspiration. And so I gave each of the blocks 2 coats of this Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and let that dry. Then I took my coarse sandpaper. I have a 60 grit sandpaper that I'm just going to tear off a piece and just rough up the edges, kind of exposing a little bit of the wood. This is just a personal preference. This is how I like to distress my projects, especially my wood projects. Now, I do have a hand palm sander, but it was late at night when I was doing this, and I didn't want to have to go outside because of all of the sawdust and that kind of thing. I also use a tack cloth. It is linked in my Amazon store for using, to get all of the little dust particles off my little wood projects like this. You can also use a baby wipe. Is something to, clean off your project so that you can move on to the next step.
To add a little bit more distressing to my pumpkins, I'm just using this antique wax by Waverly, and just taking a stiff stencil brush, I'm just brushing it on the pumpkins. What I usually do is I dip my brush in the paint and then I wipe it off on a paper towel, and then I go over my project so that I don't get too much on there. And, then I just put that to the side to dry. So then here I'm showing you the pumpkins that have the distressing antique wax on there, and then these do not. So I guess it's just a personal preference of what look you're going for. I love my puffy paint, and I do a lot of projects with that. And so I'm just going to be giving these pumpkins some doodles. I just made some squiggles and then, let that completely dry so that I could work on them.
And if you are wondering where you can purchase or find the puffy paint, it's usually sold anywhere paint is sold. Walmart, any craft store, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or if you can't find it, I always have it linked in my Amazon store. Okay, now I'm using my fine point Sharpie marker and just going around the edges and also making some, curves in it where like the ribs of the pumpkin would be so that they look a little bit more realistic.
Added some black splatters on my pumpkins first by just using a stiff paintbrush and splattering it on the pumpkins. Next, I added the white. I always do the black first, then I do the white. And I just love the way that this looks on my pumpkins. It looks very primitive country to me, and it is a personal preference. But, if you want to make pumpkins and you don't like the splatters, you don't have to do this part, but I really like the way that it makes my projects look. For the stems of my pumpkins, I have these few wine corks that I have been holding on, waiting for the perfect project. And then also I have some unfinished wooden spools that I just purchased at Hobby Lobby, I think. They're in the unfinished wood section. But you can also look at, garage sales, Goodwill, thrift shops, any place like that to find some of these treasures. I just painted them brown, and then now just using my hot glue, just gluing it in the center of the top of the pumpkin to make the stem. Now for the fun part, at least for me, I am going to show you how I made the tops of the little pumpkins using all my country primitive fun stuff. So what I'm using here is I have some homespun fabric. Homespun is just fabric you can see on both sides, and also some muslin. I'm using this burlap from the Dollar Tree. I have some pip berries. I also am using some of these paper wire stems. I get questions about these all the time. I will have a link in the description below where you can get them on Amazon, or I got mine from Walmart. So if you're lucky enough to find those, that's where I got mine. So I'm also using some raffia too. Anyway, so what I'm doing is I'm cutting about a 1-inch strip of each of those fabric, and I just tear it down the middle, rip it. It gives the ragged edges, which I like. And then I cut that burlap in half because it's a little too wide. And so for my little stems, I just took my wires and I just curled it around the a dowel, and then I hot glued that wire on first because I want that to be secured with the fabric, ribbon, and all the other fun stuff.
Now, when I am putting on this homespun fabric and this muslin and my, all of my embellishments, if the things are too long for you, you can always shorten it. I did get some comments on the finished picture saying that, my bow covered up my pumpkins, which I didn't think so. But also, I just want to be respectful for everyone's, opinions. If you make it, make the bow shorter, or you can, tear your fabric thinner so that it doesn't make the bow quite as thick as that. When I look at the picture, I'm like, oh, well, all you see is the pit berries and stuff. But if you have, pumpkins on a shelf or something like that by themselves or grouped together, they look really cute.
Now, this is just my style, my version of how I do things, but you can take it and make it your own. Okay, so now we're going to paint up this cute little welcome to our patch sign. So let's get started on painting the sign. For the sign, I'm using one of these thankful little signs from Dollar Tree, and my white Waverly chalk paint. I just paint the top of the sign with 3 coats of the Waverly chalk paint. Then now I'm using my antique white color Americana paint and my fan brush. I will have a link to the brushes that I like to use for my painting projects linked below in the description. I just take a part of the brush and I just make some little stripes on my sign because I just like the look that it gives. Just using some black paint and my number 2 flat paintbrush, I'm going to hand letter here, paint with the paintbrush. Now, it has taken me many, many years to learn how to paint with the paintbrush. I say that humbly, but I owe all of the glory to God because He has allowed me to do all of this crafting stuff and just pursue the desires of my heart because I totally love all of this painting stuff. And so without Him, I would not be able to do this. So all the glory to Him. Anyway, so I am just painting up here. Welcome to our patch. And I just like to add just little dots on the end. And I use the end of a paintbrush to do that. It's like, I have so many, my paintbrushes are so worn and so loved because I have used them so many years. And I just figure out what size I want and what size works for me. If something like this, if I mess up, I just paint over it and then start over. I know it takes extra time, but I have had many trial and error projects over the years that I'm like, oh my goodness, I do not like the way that looks, and I just start over. So anyway, paint is really good for that. Now I'm going to do some shading around the edges. I should have done this before I started my welcome to the patch, but I got a little ahead of myself. But I just dip part of my brush into paint and then the other part in water, and then shade along the edges of my project. Then now I'm just taking my fine Sharpie marker, just going around, just adding some doodles because that's what I like to do for my projects. And then I'm taking some black paint to splatter on the project. And then also I top that with some white splatters. Okay, I have 3 splatter screens with the handles, and I just took them outside and gave each side a coat of orange spray paint and let that dry completely. Then now I'm going to add some rope to the edges. And what I just want to point out here is this happens to be a rope that has 13 feet, but the Dollar Tree is now carrying the little nautical rope for 9.5 feet. So just beware for that. And then what I'm going to do now is just add rope to my splatter screens. And so I want to make sure that I have it correct. So I want to have one of the screens have the handle at the top and the other two down, because I want to bend those handles at the bottom to make my pumpkin stand up. So I just want to be mindful when I'm gluing my rope how I want to glue it. The little pink finger caps are Mod Podge finger caps. You can get them in the craft store, or I will have a link in the description below. I do get asked about these quite a bit. I use them all of the time because it helps with burned fingers. You know, that is so heartbreaking when we're doing a project and we burn our fingers. So it really kind of helps protect our fingers from the hot glue as much as it can. I use them all of the time. Anyway, I will have a link below, or you can find them in the craft store next to in the glue section. I want to stop the rope where my middle screen is going to attach, and I had put just a little tick mark from my black Sharpie marker. I apologize, I didn't get that filmed, but I'm just going to be doing half of this screen. It will butt up against the middle part of my pumpkin. Okay, once my splatter screens are completely dry with the paint, now it's kind of like a little puzzle piece, kind of putting it together. I want to make sure that those handles are at the bottom, because I'm going to bend those handles at the end to make my pumpkin stand up. And then the center one, it has the handle at the top. So I'm just kind of positioning them here to figure out where I need to put my wire. So I have this black wire. This is my favorite wire at the moment. I get this in the automotive section at the Dollar Tree, and so I'm going to use this to attach my pumpkins together. I just am putting a little piece of wire to attach the two screens together. I make sure that I have them the same way where my little lines will meet up, and then the middle pumpkin will meet up with the little lines as well. So sometimes I just was going back and forth just to make sure that I was, you know, lining everything up correctly. And then for the center screen, I wanted it to be just a tad lower than the two side screens, because, you know, to give it more of a pumpkin realistic, you know, look to it. So that's why I have the little middle pumpkin just, you know, maybe half an inch, a little bit lower. And then I just took some wire and I just, you know, just attached it in the corners. You know, if I don't have a problem with wire showing, I'll curl it. It just doesn't bother me on my projects. But if you want to, you know, cover it up, you can put some felt, or you can put some sort of covering over it. I didn't do anything because I wanted, you know, I didn't want it to be seen through my screens, but you can definitely do that. Now I'm going to work on my handle, and I wanted it to be curved a little bit, and I got this tip from one of my members over in the Country Charm community. She made one of these pumpkins and shared it in the group, and she told me how she did it. She just bent it over, and so then now I have just some twine. Now I got this twine at Hobby Lobby. You can get this big old bundle like this from Walmart has it as well, but I like this. It's a little bit thicker than the twine from the Dollar Tree, so that's why I'm using it. And I'm just going to wrap it around this handle. Wrapping the jute was a bit tricky when I got to the end, so I just kind of kept wrapping it on itself, hot gluing it, put lots of hot glue on there. That's where those pink fingertips really come in handy, so that I didn't hot glue my fingers, because that doesn't feel very good. Anyway, I just kept, you know, twirling it on top of each other. Now the fun part begins. I get to decorate the top, and so I have these little off-white or cream colored flowers. They're little glitzy wildflowers that I got from the Dollar Tree. So I'm just going to kind of make a spray on the top of the pumpkin and attach that to the top of that little pumpkin. The orange picks are pip berries from Hobby Lobby, my favorite store, and also my favorite little berry are these little pip berries. I got those on clearance last year, so now I'm excited to be able to use them in this little project. I've decided to pull out a bunch of the little leaves. I got these from the Dollar Tree a couple of years ago. Doesn't seem like the leaves from the Dollar Tree now are quite as full as these, so it pays to kind of, you know, keep things from year to year. And what I did is I bent half of it one way and the other half the other way, and then so that it will go on this spray. And then now I'm just taking some wire and I'm just going to wire all of these together. I'm not going to attach it to the pumpkin yet. I just want to just have this spray together just by putting some wire. To insert my little curly cues, I just stuck them through the wire and then just kind of spread those out. And then I attach my swag to my pumpkin using an extra piece of wire. And then now I have this 10-inch poly jute mesh. I'm cutting it to 12-inch strips. And then to attach all of my ribbon and my bow to my pumpkin, I'm gonna use this chenille stem, and I didn't have very much trouble at all just sticking it through the back. And then I'm just gonna twist that, just kind of layer my ribbon on there. Now I have my mesh, and I'm just kind of holding it in my hand and just kind of doing a ruffle technique, just kind of bending the ends over on itself. And then now I'm just gonna put that layer on there and get ready for my ribbon.
Okay guys, these are definitely a fan favorite, my primitive country pumpkin bowl fillers. Let me share how I do mine, and maybe you'll pick up a tip or two. Okay, here are the supplies I used: some burlap, some homespun fabric, some cinnamon sticks, Mod Podge, some black as well as some white paint, some stuffing, and some sisal twine. Okay, this is a great project to use up some of your scraps. I just had this piece of 6-inch burlap left from a recent project. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a coat of Mod Podge on the burlap because the burlap is flimsy and I want it to be a little formed and have just a little stability to it. So this Mod Podge gives it some stability. So then once I put this layer of Mod Podge on, I just put it to the side and let it dry. Okay, to make the pumpkin, I am just going to kind of eyeball it and just kind of make a pumpkin. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can make something like a pattern out of cardstock, or you can print something off online for a pattern that you like. But pumpkins come in all different shapes and sizes, so this is great to use up your scraps and just kind of not stress over it and just, you know, let your scissors do the work. Anyway, so I'm just, you know, evening up everything, and then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut off around, just round the edges and just make a pumpkin. Okay, now to make the pumpkin, I just have my hot glue gun and I just have these little hot glue fingers because when I'm working with burlap like this, it kind of seeps through the fabric. Even though we put some Mod Podge on it, it still kind of seeps through. So I want to protect my fingers and not get burned. So I'm just gluing each side and just closing that up. I left a hole at the top because that is where I'm going to insert the stuffing. Now I am going to paint my pumpkins. I just have a flat paintbrush that I dip half of the brush in black paint, the other half in water, and then I blend it on that paper towel. And then I just run it over the edges, and then I just give it some little lines like for the ridges of the pumpkin, flip it over, and then do the other side. Now, then I go on to insert the filling or the stuffing in the pumpkin, but honestly, I really should have splattered it because I like the splattered country look. You know, I had a comment one time that a lady left me and said that, you know, doesn't look good. You know, to each its own, but I like that look on my projects, and so I'm going to do them on my projects. So what I'm doing here is I am inserting the cinnamon stick and using my little hot glue fingers so that my fingers don't get burned. I just kind of hold all that together, and then I'm going to put the homespun ribbon on. I just tear this homespun ribbon, fabric rather. Homespun is, you can see it on both sides, and I like that it's really popular in the country decorating country world. And so I'm just inserting, just tying little bows right here, and then I use my pinking shears to cut off like the edges, and then I just have the sisal twine, and then I'm going to make a bow. But once I get to this point, then I'm like, something's missing. They don't look right. And so then I look at one that I've already done and I'm like, I'm missing the splattering. And so I just have an old stencil brush here, and I take a toothpick and I just run it across and make some little splatters. Definitely be still my heart. These are burlap pumpkin bowl fillers are definitely a favorite. And so I want to share now how I created some buffalo check pumpkins using some white burlap. So that's what I'm going to share here. It looks great in a small bowl like this, or a dough tray, or a bucket, or just a box. Anything that you can find to display your pumpkins are just really cute. So let me share how I created and painted up
The
these.
supplies that I used is this white burlap, and they are cut at 6-inch strips, and those strips itself are about 48 inches long, and then as well as some Mod Podge. Then for the fabric, for the little bow ties, I'm going to use some homespun fabric, and then that darker muslin fabric. For the stuffing, I'm using this filling stuffing, some cinnamon sticks for the stem, and then some orange burlap 1-inch ribbon that I had in my stash. So for the burlap, I just spread that out and I put a layer of Mod Podge on there and then let that dry, because that gives my pumpkin some stiffness and stability while I'm working and creating the little pumpkin. To make the pumpkin, I just cut out strips like this, and if you fold it over, it gives you a crease at the bottom, which is great for my pumpkin. And then I'm just going to take my scissors, and then I'm just going to fussy cut it around like a pumpkin shape. If it doesn't need to be perfect. Pumpkins come in all shapes and sizes. They're, slanted on one side, smushed in, and so I wouldn't stress about this too much, but if you want a pattern, you can Google it or get free patterns online. Since the bottom has the crease, I just need to glue in the sides. So I'm just using my hot glue gun, and then those pink fingertips are Mod Podge fingertips. I will have a link in the description below. I get a lot of questions about those. You can find them in the craft store. You can also find them on Amazon if you want to check out what they look like. I'll leave a link in the description below. But they have been a lifesaver for this crafty girl, let me tell you. I just glue the sides, leaving an opening at the top so I can put in my stuffing and my stem. So I'm just taking a 1-inch paintbrush and I'm just going to make vertical stripes down. I decided to do this pattern. I'm using this gray paint, a lighter gray. It's not a light gray and it's not a dark gray. I just like this. It was in my stash. It's by Delta Ceramicoat. And I'm just taking my gray paint and I'm just making vertical stripes, just eyeballing it. I did not tape this off because I think that the hand painting makes it so unique. For the vertical stripes, I'm using this chalk paint by Waverly. I get this at Walmart. It's the color Elephant. So I'm just taking my 1-inch brush and just going across horizontal, and then I just kind of eyeball that again and make some more stripes. I did let the bottom coat dry pretty good before I did my second layer, which is this elephant paint. And otherwise, if it's wet, it'll smear and then you'll wind up painting over it. So I have a little bit of control of where I put my black. I'm using a 1/2-inch paintbrush, and I'm just going to color in all of the squares where the lighter and the darker gray paint meet. Once my pumpkin is completely dry, I am going to add some shading around the pumpkin outside of the pumpkin. So I just have some black paint. I dip half of my brush in paint, half in clean water, and then I have a paper towel that I put that to the side and I blend on that. And then I just run it across my pumpkin or my project and just gives it a little bit of dimension. And then I also am giving some little ripples of the pumpkin. Then the next step, once that's dry, I am taking some white paint, and then I also have some water that I am watering it down, because when I'm working with thin, I want to make some thin little lines, and so then that gives me a very like ink consistency. Of course, you know, I have done it in the past where I've put too much water and had to start over. But, you know, the more you do this, the more you find little tricks and things that work for you. Now I'm just adding some splattering. I've already splattered the black paint. I always do the black and then I do the white paint on top of it. I had done the black and I went, oh my goodness, I forgot to film it. So I'm just showing you here how I splattered the white paint. To stuff the pumpkin, I just have my stuffing and I stuff it through the top of the pumpkin. And I'm going to use a dowel rod, just kind of push that stuffing in there, and I can kind of push it to the side where it may be a little flat. And then using some hot glue, I just glue that opening shut. I stick my cinnamon stick in there for the stem. The muslin fabric and the homespun fabric I cut at 1-inch strips. I love to use my pinking shears for that. The orange burlap I cut at 9 inches. Now these may be a tad long, but it gives me some leverage so that I can tie the bow around that cinnamon stick, and then I will trim off any of the excess with my pinking shears. To make the bow, I have the 2 strips of homespun fabric, and then this burlap, I can't tie it in a bow very well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrunch that in the middle, and I'm going to use my little tiny attacher, little mini stapler. I love this. This is one of my favorite crafting tools, and I'm going to staple that because it's going to hold that in the middle and give me, you know, something to crease to. So the homespun fabric and the muslin fabric, then I will just slip that through. I'm going to show you here how I created a little opening, and when I tied it around that cinnamon stick so that I could get my burlap fabric in there as well. And I just kind of play with it, just kind of twisting that fabric and that ribbon, and then using my pinking shears, I just trim off any of the anything that's too long. Use my hot glue to glue everything together, and my little pumpkins are done. Here are the supplies that I use: some foam pumpkins, some chalk paint, some buffalo check ribbon, some black jute for the stem, some leaves, some Mod Podge, and then I also used a dowel to create my little curlicues for my pumpkins. I'm also showing you this gingham buffalo check ribbon here because this is what I used on one of my pumpkins. I start by removing the stems of my pumpkin and then give each pumpkin 2 coats of chalk paint. That way you don't see any of the orange through the ribbon. And just a little tip, I used a wooden skewer, and I have another little piece of a styrofoam that I use for projects like this. If you stick the skewer through the bottom of the pumpkin, and then you can let it dry. To let my little curlicues set up, I'm just twisting them around, giving it a coat of Mod Podge on this little dowel. Then once I'm ready to do my stem, I just have this extra piece of paper, and I am just gluing that around there, and I'm going, because I want my stem to be just a little bit thicker. I would have used something different if I was thinking like a wine cork or something like that. I didn't have any of those. So I'm just kind of, you know, this is what I did with the other ones, and it worked well. And so I'm just wrapping this black jute around the paper and hot gluing it all the way around. Now I'm just figuring out how long I want to cut my ribbon. I just want it to go around my pumpkin, and then I just cut that and hold it up to the spool And then I'll just trim that off like that. Now for the 3 pumpkins, I used 3 different patterns of buffalo check. 2 of them were 1.5 inch, and then the larger one was 2.5 inch. I like the smaller buffalo check I found by doing this project, but you can use whatever ribbon you want. So for the 1.5 inch, I used 16 pieces of ribbon, and for the 2.5 inch, the larger buffalo check, I used 8 pieces of ribbon. To attach the ribbon, I'm going in like a counterclockwise motion, and for that first piece of ribbon, I'm just tacking it down just a bit. I want to, once I get all the way around on the other side as I glue my ribbon, I'm going to want to be able to pick up that first piece and layer the last piece underneath it, and it'll make more sense as we get to it. But I'm just continuing to glue the ribbon and just kind of pleating it at the top and then also at the bottom. That way it kind of lays really nicely, and it also sits nicely at the bottom. I'm going to put a piece of felt at the bottom, so I'm not really worried about if my ribbon is too long or not long enough rather, and if any of the little white of the pumpkin is showing. It's underneath it, so I'm not really going to worry about that. So I'm just showing you here, I'm just continuing to glue the ribbon on the pumpkin, and then as I get to this last little part, this is a little more tricky. I wanted that first piece to overlap the last piece, so I am just fiddling with that here, just trying to figure out how that is going to fit in there and look the way that I want it to look. I painted some leaves for my pumpkin. The black I did 2 coats of chalk paint, and the white I did 3 coats of chalk paint. Now to finish off my pumpkin, I have a piece of felt I'm just gluing to the bottom because the ribbon is wired, and so sometimes when you have those little end cuts, they're kind of pokey. So I just added a piece of felt to the bottom. And for my stem, what I did, once I hot glued the jute all the way around my stem, it kind of leaves like some film or something on it, and you know, I didn't like that from the hot glue, and so I just took some black paint and just painted over it, and it is all cool. Everything's good. So then now I'm just gluing my pumpkins to my leaves to my pumpkin, and then I had already attached my little curly cues to my pumpkin, and I think they just turned out perfect. Then I just hot glue the stem to the pumpkin, and it just looks really pretty. I love the way that these pumpkins turned out just by using some Dollar Tree pumpkins and adding some buffalo check gingham ribbon to it. I am sharing my version of this farmhouse fall box. Now, I was inspired by something I saw on Instagram. I will link my inspiration in the description box below because I do want to give credit for that inspiration. I am all about community over competition and supporting other creatives. Now, the supplies that I used are mostly from the Dollar Tree, with the exception of the paper that came from Hobby Lobby. So I have, you know, the pumpkin, the box, the flowers, the stickers, the styrofoam, and the little welcome sign is from that little harvest pack of galvanized words. The first thing I did was remove the raffia bow. I took off the leaf as well as cut off that jute stem. I didn't need that. Then I took my elephant chalk paint. It is a gray paint, and I paint it around the edges of the pumpkin. I don't paint the whole front, but I do paint the back. I'm painting the edges because if my paper doesn't secure all the way to the edges, I'll show you that a little bit later, then I don't see any of the orange of the pumpkin, that it will blend in with the back. I wanted to make a bit of distressing, so just follow along with me here. I have my hot glue, and I am just going around the pumpkin, and I'm just going to just put some hot glue on there. It is going to make some humps and bumps, and I don't care if it's more in one place. It just kind of adds to the distressing of it. I think it adds character to it, and I achieves the look that I was going for. So I just make the rims and the edges of the pumpkin. I should have completed this step before I painted my pumpkin, but I just completely forgot. So if you recreated, trace out your paper first so you don't make this mistake that I'm going to show you. Anyway, so I traced out the pumpkin, and then as you can see, I'm cutting here. I'm like, oh no, I got some paint on there. Oh my goodness. So I have to trace out another one, and don't make that same mistake. So do it before you paint your pumpkin. Anyway, so then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Mod Podge, and I'm doing this slowly because I'm going to show you that it gives me the best results. What I'm looking for is I'm trying to create some ridges on my pumpkin, and so I just put a little bit of Mod Podge on there, and then I'm going to put some on the paper, and I'm going to work in sections, smoothing that down with my little scraper, and also I have this little tool, that little tool, I forget what it's called. Anyway, but I smooth that down the best that I can. I'm not putting a coat of Mod Podge on the top of the paper until the bottom completely dries. I learned that from watching someone else's video. That if you let it completely dry before you put your Mod Podge on there, that you don't have any of the bubbles. Now, I just have some of the raised areas where my ridges of my pumpkins are, and I'm completely okay with that. But if you don't want bubbles in your paper of your when you put Mod Podge on, let it completely dry before you put the top coat on. Now I'm going to take my coarse sandpaper. I have a 60 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to rough up the edges, just kind of taking off some of that. And you can kind of see where like a little glob of the glue kind of makes it a little more raised. And as I run my sandpaper over it, it gives more of the distressed look. You're going to have some paper particles or dust particles. I just use this tack cloth. I will have a link in the description below if you would like to check it out. So that I use these in my craft room all of the time, and it helps me get off those little dust particles and clean up my projects. So now what I'm doing is I am putting a second coat of Mod Podge on top of my little pumpkin. I'm going to give some shading to my pumpkin. I'm using this Americana brown color in milk chocolate. I just take my flat brush. I will have a link in the description below of the brushes that I use because I do get questions about those. Anyway, but to do my shading, I have some clean water. I dip half of my brush in water, half of my brush in paint, smooth it out or blend it on a paper towel, and then I shade my projects. To wrap the stem, I'm using this burlap from the Dollar Tree. I cut it in half because it's a little easier for me to work with. And then I'm going to hot glue it to the stem. I'm using my pink finger caps. They're little hot glue finger caps, kind of protect your fingers. You can get them in any craft store where glue is sold. I will have a link in the description to my Amazon store. Also, a friend had shared that she found some over at the Dollar Tree. The box I'm using is also from the Dollar Tree. It is 4.5 inches tall, and then it is 5.5 inches wide. So it's the perfect little size for me. And what I'm going to do is give it 2 coats of this elephant gray chalk paint. To add some extra touches, I take my fine Sharpie marker, just go around the pumpkin to enhance it a little bit. This is strictly a personal preference of mine. I like to do that, as well as give some splattering to my projects. I'm using some of the brown paint that I used for the shading. And then I didn't show it on camera, but I painted my galvanized welcome black, and then now I'm showing you I gave everything a coat of varnish. Now to glue the welcome to my front of the pumpkin, I'm using this rapid fuse glue. It is like a super glue. It glues really fast, and I don't know, I just find better results with this rather than just using hot glue on this. So I just use my rapid fuse glue to it, and then it just, you know, attaches there to the pumpkin. And then for the fall, I'm just taking my stickers and I'm not putting them all the way down. I just want to make sure that I have them centered. So then once I figure out the placement, I go back and I put them where I want them. You can also use your Cricut silhouette, or if you find another place that has stickers, to spell out the word that you would like it to. Now I'm just going back with some black paint and touching up some of the little parts that just by handling that welcome sign, it just kind of came off a little bit. And then to attach the pumpkin to my box, I am just hot gluing that on there, and then now it's time to decorate it. So this is how my box is looking so far. I just input those 3 little sections of styrofoam in there and then covered it with Excelsior. Now I'm just adding some flowers to the box, just hot gluing them in there. Some of them I don't even think I hot glued. I just stuck them in there until I like the look of it. I am not a professional floral designer. I've never been to the floral design school. I just stick flowers in there until I like it, like the look of it. I added some of those hot bushes from Dollar Tree. I love those little flowers that the Dollar Tree has now. Now we're going to make a bow. The black and white and the orange and white is from Hobby Lobby. The white chevron and the burlap is from Dollar Tree, and that other little burlap is from Walmart. I got that at an after Christmas sale several years ago. Now I cut these ribbons at 12 inches, and then I just make a dovetail or V-cut, however you want to say it. I like to do that. It kind of adds just a little finishing touch for my bows. Now using my little mini stapler, tiny attacher. This is one of my favorite crafting tools. I have mentioned that before. I layer my ribbons the way that I want, and then I secure them with the little stapler. It just kind of holds everything together. And then just taking this little burlap. This is the one that I got after Christmas from Walmart. And then I just make a little bow. It's like a 3-inch loop with like some 5-inch tails. So then I just make that like that. I have this little piece of burlap that's kind of the end of the roll of the burlap. I kind of like the way that it looks curly like that. So I just layer everything on top of each other. And then I'm like, we got to add some raffia, because this country girl would not have a country project without some raffia. So we're adding that to the middle of that and layering that burlap on top of that. I have a chenille stem that I will twist everything around and secure it all together. And then I just hot glue the bow to the little stem just right there on the top. And this little project is complete. So I am just using this ribbon from Dollar General. I picked it up this year, 2020. It was $2 for this roll. And also I'm using some cinnamon sticks for the stem. Now what I did, I didn't want it too big, so I just measured out my ribbon and it was like about 5 inches, I think. And I really didn't, I wanted more room at the top so that I would have room for stuffing and for getting my stick in there and for gluing it. So I just, cut off the ribbon and then just glued the sides. Well, first I folded it over so that it would have the crease at the bottom, and then I just glued the sides, and the only thing that was open was the top. Wanted my corners around the bottom to be more rounded, so I just glued the corners and then I used my little spatula and held that down, and that worked really good. And so then now I'm going to decorate my pumpkins. So I have some pip berries, and then I also have this green colored wire that I purchased at Hobby Lobby in the craft floral section. I know that I will get questions about this. I will have it written out in the description box also, so that you will know where to find it or where I purchased it in the floral section at Hobby Lobby. And so it is paper colored or paper covered wire, and it works great for little projects like this. And so then I just trim off the berries and just hot glue everything together. I'm taking more of the burlap, cutting that in half, and then I just kind of twist it like a bow tie and just put that on there because I wanted a little ragged bow. And then I'm just taking strips of raffia and just tying it around to make a bow. And I just love these little pumpkins. I can't wait to make more. Guys, I appreciate you watching, and if you recreate any of the videos today, I invite you to share pictures with me over in my free Facebook community called Country Charm Crafty Community. You will need to request to join. I will approve you, and then you can share your recreations with me or inspire me and show me what you've created. I have this small little wooden crate from the Dollar Tree, and I just painted it this, it's called Antique White Color by Americana. I just gave it a coat of that. I took my antique vintage photo ink, and with my little finger dauber, I just gave it some distressing so that it looked a little more worn. And this is what I'm going to be putting my pumpkins in. And to fill it, I just used some of the Excelsior. Now, I like the whimsy look, and so I do share just crafts just to inspire you, but you, as the creator, can definitely use what you want and as much or as little as you would like to. Just added some small little flowers from the Dollar Tree, just sticking them in there. And then I have some homespun fabric that just coordinating with this rustic fall little arrangement, and I'm just going to tear off a strip of that. I like the ragged edges when I tear it, and just probably tore it about an inch. And I just, tie that around the crate, and then in the middle, just tie it into a knot. If you feel that there is too much in this little crate where it's too bunched up, you can always, not put quite as much as I do, but I like the whimsy look for my projects. I'm using one of these small chalkboard labels from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just using this little paint pen. It is a Posca white paint pen, and I am just going to hand letter pumpkin patch, and then I will stick that into the crate with my little pumpkins.
All right, for these square pumpkins fall decor, these turned out so cute. I used some canvases, some rectangle canvases, as well as just some different fun embellishments. So let me share what I did. The canvases that I'm using two 8x10 canvases. One I just turned sideways. The other is an 11x14 canvas that we're going to make these square pumpkins.
Okay, these are the papers that I selected. I wanted something that was a little bit bright and not real, because I'm going to distress them myself with some ink and, markers and all that, what I like to do. So I am just kind of figuring out where I'm going to put the papers. I'm going to line them up where the circles match. I don't have a big enough sheet of paper because these papers are 12x12, so I'm just going to line them up. And once I embellish them by inking and putting markers and gluing all the embellishments, it really is okay.
Okay, here I just have some decoupage or Mod Podge, and I just put that on the 11x14 canvas. And since I'm using two of these 12x12 sheets of paper. Now this particular paper I did have in my stash. It was part of a large bundle of paper that I got years ago at Hobby Lobby. And so, this is just ideas. You can
if you would like to recreate this, just use the paper that matches your style. So here I'm just kind of, trying to figure out, okay, how do I need the circles so that they line up? I'm okay if they have a little crinkles in them, because I think that that adds to the character of the pumpkins, because my projects and my crafts are usually country. And so I'm just using, like I said, some decoupage, some Mod Podge. It's kind of the same thing. It's just a glue that holds down the paper. I'm just using my Cricut spatula just to smooth everything down. And then I'm going to work on this one. This orange paper, it was a little bit brighter. I was looking for something, just a little different than my normal. And so I like this paper and all these patterns. I think it looks really pretty, and just all ties in together with all the embellishments and everything. So I'll just keep going around using my decoupage, Mod Podge, and just smoothing all of that on, and just cutting the paper, kind of wrapping it like you do a present or a gift. For the stems of my pumpkins, I am using small, just scrap wood. Now, I've had these in my stash for several years. When my husband and I were doing wood crafts, we were doing the craft show circuit. He would cut out my wood, and then we would have, extra boards and that kind of thing. And so he was awesome and would just cut them into little pieces like this, and so that I could, paint on them, or use them for little different things for my projects. So I'm just giving this a coat of a brown acrylic paint, and this is going to be the stem of my pumpkins. They're going to, I'm just going to attach them with just some glue, and then I'm going to put my embellishments on and everything like that. So now my canvases are all dry, and I'm just kind of positioning, trying to see how I want to, what collection that I want them to be in. And so then what I'm using some mixed media projects or products. They're like in the scrapbooking section. All of these are going to be linked in my Amazon store. Now, these are called gelatos. They're just like a paste that, that can distress your projects. Now, I am just sharing some things that I have for my mixed media when I like to do this. And so the gelatos, like I said, is a paste. It kind of, you can wet it with your fingers, or I can wet it with my fingers, kind of blend it in a little bit just to give a bit of distressing to my pumpkins and to kind of countrify them just a little bit. And so that's why I wanted to use the brighter paper, because I knew that I was going to use some of this distressing paste and markers and different sprays and things like that. Now, if you're interested in where you can find these type of things, they're usually found in the scrapbooking section of like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, or as I mentioned, they are linked in my Amazon store if you would like to get a little bit more information, because some of these things have been around for a couple of years, and I love using them. Now, to expose the wood just a little, I'm just using my sanding block and just exposing a bit of the wood. I use my tack cloth to wipe off any of the dust particles. Then I like to give my projects a gloss sealer. This is the one that I like the most. So I just give all of my stems, or each of my stems, as well as go around the canvases, and it kind of just seals everything in, and I don't have to worry about it coming up or anything like that. Okay, to attach the stem to the top of the canvas, to make it look like the pumpkin stem, I'm using a combination of E6000 glue as well as hot glue. The E6000 is the permanent hold, and then the hot glue kind of gives it the instant hold. So I'm just, going to do this to all three of my pumpkins. And like I said, I use that 8.5, 2 8.5s by 11 canvas. And so then by turning them, different ways, one sideways, then that gives me a different look. And so then now I'm just, gluing all of my pumpkins together. I'm just using my E6000 as well as my hot glue. I'm also going to be using my electric staple gun. Now I have had that staple gun. I got it at Sears many years ago. I know that maybe other places has electric staple guns. If not, you can use a manual gun or attach it, if you want to recreate this project, you can, secure it any way that you can, secure your projects. Okay, at this point, I'm like, it's missing something. So I had forgotten to put the curves or the ridges of the pumpkins, but that's not a problem. I'm just taking my brown gelato and just making the curves of the pumpkins. If you were to recreate this, I would suggest doing this before you attach them all together and not make the error like I did. But hey, it all works and we are good. And so what I do is I wet my finger and just, because it gives it a distressed look, and then it's all, kind of blends in together there. Okay, then now I'm going to use my fine Sharpie marker, and then I just go around each of the pumpkins just to give some extra doodling, because guys, that's what I like to do. Thank you so much for all of your sweet comments. Welcome anyone who's new. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I love to share crafty ideas with a bit of rustic country charm, just like these rustic square pumpkins. Okay, this is an ivy garland that I got maybe Hobby Lobby at one of the craft stores. I had it in my stash, and so I like it. This it has like some wire in it so that I can form it a bit, and I like using these type of different textures on my projects because it does give it a realistic feel. And so I'm just using my wire cutters just to cut off pieces of them, and then I will like twist it around my fingers just to kind of look like it's more cascading down, like what leaves on a pumpkin would look like. And so then I'm going to use my staple gun as well, and just make sure that I staple the ivy to the wood frame so that it all secures together. Now I'm going to make my bow, my junk bow, messy bow, refab bow, whatever one chooses to call it. And I just have some different strips of fabric, some muslin fabric in different colors, as well as some polka dotted orange ribbon. I'm sure I got that at Hobby Lobby. I'm also using strips of orange rickrack. You can also get that at the craft store. And so then I was singeing the edges of the rickrack so that it would not fray. And then this small 1-inch burlap I've had in my stash for a couple of years, and I'm not quite sure where I got that one from. About here, I'm like, it needs a little something. So I pulled out some tool. It's like a glittery tool, but the glitter doesn't come off. And I think I got this at Hobby Lobby as well, or maybe Walmart, something like that. And I just cut off strips of that, and I decided to add it to my bow to provide a bit of softness to my bow. I think I just love working with all these different textures of ribbon and different just different mediums that all work together and just make the project so cute.
Okay, I just fluffed out my bows a bit, just making sure that none of my ribbon tails were tucked underneath there. Then I used, hot glue and my staple gun just to attach the bows to the wooden frame as well, so that everything's nice and secure.
Okay, now I'm going to add some Stiffen Quick. It is a stiffener for ribbon and or for fabric or anything, but I like to use this on my bows that are ribbon, or like this fabric is a little limp, and so that it kind of gives it some formation, and I really like the way that turns out.
I didn't put a hanger or anything like that, but one could, totally do that. I just set them on my shelf and just lean them up against my mirror. Anyway, I love the way that these turned out, and I hope you do as well. Everything is so nice and fun and funky and country. Okay, for this project, I'm using a 12 by 12 canvas, and it is a mixed media pumpkin project. Now, this 12 by 12 canvas, I get my canvases at Michael's, I do believe. And I picked up some patterns that were at my thrift store. And I like to use patterns and stuff like this, all different kind of textures when you're doing a mixed media project. I'm using my decoupage or Mod Podge, that kind of thing. And I just, put the pattern across the canvas, and then I just glue it all down so that all the sides and everything were covered as well. I'll just go over it with that decoupage, and then I just have some pieces of just from an old book, and I crumple them up and I tear them, and I'm just going to ink around them to give it some depth and dimension. That is really what mixed media is. You can use all kind of different paper products, different kind of scrapbook paper and everything like that. This just really is a piece of art just by the different textures and different things that you use. I'm just using my little heat tool in between the different layers to dry the glue as much as I could. When you're using mixed media, there's lots of different products that you can use. This right here, this white stuff is called gesso or gesso. I'm not really sure. And I don't know, it just kind of adds just different texture. And then I had this stencil in my stash. You can get stencils at, the craft store and different, on Amazon, that kind of thing. And then I just use my Stays On ink just to provide just some different patterns of stamps, and the distress ink as well as different stamps. Now I get my stamps and different things from the craft store. Always look in the clearance section, because sometimes you can find some really cool different stamps. Anyway, okay, so then now I'm using this gelato, and as I mentioned in my in the other pumpkin project, you can find these gelatos in my Amazon store. I'm not quite sure if they sell them in the craft store. I have never really looked, because I purchased mine off of Amazon. And so then I'll just go around the different torn edges, just wetting my finger to blend it in a bit. And then I'm using some distress spray. You can also get that at the craft store. And you can just find everything in the scrapbooking section. That is where you're going to find the majority of the products that I am using in these projects. Okay, so here I'm using just a small stencil, and then I'm using my palette knife as well as some texture paste, because I am just going around it, and it gives it some dimension. And I just use my palette knife just to, spread it on the stencil, just to give it just different. Every piece is always different when you're doing a mixed media. Here I'm going to use my orange gelato and just going over where the textured paste is, and then it is I just use my finger just to spread it out and blend it in a bit, and then it was just a little bright, so I just took a baby wipe and just kind of rubbed off some of the color so that it wouldn't be quite as bright, and then I just sprayed on some more distress ink. Now here, this is my pumpkin, and I'm sure I just I don't even know where I got this design. I probably just had a pumpkin. Maybe I designed it on my Cricut. I'm not really sure. It was something that I had in my stash. And so I'm not quite sure where I got, but you can get pumpkin patterns anywhere. And so then I'm just going around the edges, just giving it some inking and some distressing. And so I just kind of layer it all in there together, and just decoupage it all down, or Mod Podge would work as well. These zigzag chevron shapes are something that I cut out on my Cricut. There's different designs that you can get, in Design Space. And so then I just decoupaged, Mod Podge those down as well. And so then now to give it a bit more distress, I'm using my Faber-Castell markers. And if you watch anyone that does mixed media, sometimes they will use this. You can kind of blend them a bit more with your fingers. That's what I'm doing. Now, I am not a mixed media artist. This is just, projects that I wanted to try, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of sharing my projects, but I am by no means a mixed media artist. And so I just, by watching other mixed media videos and just, looking at mixed media art, these are the kind of things that they do. You can just make beautiful, beautiful projects just by adding all of the different layers. Basically, that's what it is, just adding different layers. So then now I'm just painting on some leaves and some tendrils of my pumpkins just to give it a little bit more realistic look. Now I'm going to work on the message that I want for my board. And so I just am hand lettering Happy Fall, Y'all. And I'll do my little happy dots and my doodles and that kind of thing. I'm just cutting it apart, and then I'll tear it because I like the torn edges. I think that it, kind of all ties everything together in this mixed media project. Now, I like to do this because that's my look, and I appreciate so many kind friends saying that they, like my style of lettering. I have found a free font that is the most realistic to my lettering. My lettering is all different. I know people have asked about, providing that, but it depends on what word I'm writing, depends on the letters and everything. So it is called Gel Dotica font. I will have it linked for you in the description below. You can, maybe print it out and on different colors of cardstock, and then you can use it for your project. I used my white Faber-Castell marker to add some highlight to the letters, and I think it just ties everything together. I'm using some glossy accents, just this glossy accents that I picked up in the scrapbooking section as well, and I just glued that down. That just, I don't really know, I can't remember why I used that, but I saw a lot of other mixed media artists use that, so that's what I use. Anyway, so then now I'm just putting some black slick paint just to give it a bit more dimension, and I just love the way that this little pumpkin mixed media project turned out, and I hope you do too. Okay, next up is my Country Rustic Burlap Pumpkin Wreath. Now, this is one that I did using burlap that I buy off of the bolt. I bought many yards of the burlap. I don't know how many yards it took. I'm so sorry, but I usually have lots of burlap in my stash, and so I just say just use the burlap. You just have to kind of figure out how much you want on it. And when I work with burlap, where I cut it with my rotary cutter, I always wear a mask so that I don't breathe the fibers. And so then I roll out my burlap, and I cut at 6 inches width, and that is, I just cut a lot of strips, and then I form it onto my wreath frame so that it makes it full, and then depending on how full I want it will depend on how many strips I need.
And so here I'm just showing you the strips of the burlap. The more you work with it, the more it frays, and so that's where the mask comes in. So I definitely recommend a mask. So here are all of the supplies that I'm thinking about using. I haven't decided which of the ribbons I'm going to use, but definitely want a black and white gingham or buffalo check. The frame is a 14-inch metal frame that I got from the Dollar Tree. So then now to start my burlap, I just have a chenille stem, and I just thread it through the burlap, and then I just attach it to the frame, and then I'm doing the poof technique, and just by going in and out those wires, you can start to see how the burlap frays. Now, I'll be honest with you, this orange burlap does fray a lot more than just the natural burlap, but I figured out this was the look that I was going for, and so I've decided to go ahead and go with this, but make sure that you use your mask when you're working with this type of burlap. So I cut off the ends of that burlap, and I'm just threading another piece, and you may see that I did not attach the end of that burlap, and it's because I'm going to cut that a little bit shorter, and that's going to give me some fraying on the edges of that, but I'm going to go ahead and do that once I get the wreath finished, and then I see what ends are a little bit too long, and then I go back and I trim my edges, any strings, any, things that are a little bit too long. So I'm just going to continue making these little poofs. Okay, I'm going to leave just a section for some green burlap. Now, I've decided not to use any of the ribbon that I showed in my supplies. I remembered that I had some green burlap that I I'm going to use for the per se leaves. And so I'm just doing it the same way. I am just taking my rotary cutter and I'm cutting a few strips of this green burlap, and then I will attach it to the frame in the same way. I'm leaving a little section so that I can add some brown burlap for a stem. So I'm just making my stem here, just trying to figure out how I want to do it. So I just rolled up a piece of burlap and then just hot gluing the edges so that it stays. Those little Mod Podge hot glue fingertips are a lifesaver when it comes to your fingers. So anyway, I'm just gluing that shut and then just trying to figure out how I want to attach this stem to this frame. So as I'm working with this, I realized that this thing is really too long. So I cut it down and then I figure out how I'm going to attach it, because the stem it doesn't need to be that long. So anyway, the best thing that I found to attach this little stem to the frame is with a little zip tie. And you can get little zip ties at Walmart, at the craft store, at, you know, so many different places. And so I just threaded through that little burlap and attach it directly to the frame. And then what I'll do is I'll put that third strip of burlap and cover up any of the, cover up any of the little holes, and then just readjust my leaves so they, my wreath looks the way that I want it to. For the bow, I've just decided to use this buffalo check ribbon that I got from Hobby Lobby. So I'm just making a simple 4-loop bow, 2 loops on each side. And so I'm just going to, play around with it, figure out how long I want the tails, and then I will attach it to the wreath. In working with this buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby, I realized even though it's wired, it's very flimsy wired, and so I'm using my Aleene's Stiffen Quick spray adhesive, because it's going to stiffen up this ribbon a little bit, and it just kind of gives me the body of the ribbon of what I'm looking for. Now, for me, it would not be a country wreath without adding some raffia. So what I did is I just took several strands of raffia and I made a simple little bow, just tied a knot in it. And then now what I'm doing is I threaded some wire, some very thin wire. I like to get the wire from Dollar Tree, and I threaded it through the back of that bow, and then I thread it through the burlap, and then I go ahead and attach it to my wreath. And I just fiddle with the bow to get it however I like it. What I decided to do is take this wreath outside and give it a good coat of sealer. This is the sealer that I use, this Mod Podge matte sealer. I just sprayed the whole thing on the front and the back with this Mod Podge matte clear acrylic sealer. And also, to give it a little extra pizzazz, I had some of this spray glitter paint that I have in my craft.
I'm starting with one of these pumpkin wood cutouts from the Dollar Tree. I took off the string, and then I'm going to give it 2 coats of this Americana acrylic paint in the color Espresso. To add my polka dots, I have this set of foam brushes that I picked up from Michael's, and it has different sizes of foam brushes in it. I'm using the 1-inch foam circle brush, as well as some spiced pumpkin acrylic paint, and just dipping that in, I load up my sponge brush very, where it's quite a bit in there. And how I do my polka dots is I start in the middle of my project and then I work from there. I usually do like a 1, 2, and then I space them out accordingly. And, that way, if I start in the middle, I feel that my polka dots are more even. To add a bit of more pizzazz, I'm just taking the end of a paintbrush, dipping it in that same orange spice pumpkin paint, and just doing 3 dots throughout the whole pumpkin. For this pumpkin, I'm using one of these from the Dollar Tree that come on a stand. I removed everything off of the pumpkin and just took my sanding sponge and got off any of the excess glitter or anything like that. Now I'm taking my needle nose fine tip Surebonder glue gun and just hot gluing some bulk or some dimension or some ribs of the pumpkins. I've done this on other projects and I really like the way that it turned out once I put the scrapbook paper on there. This whiteboard scrapbook paper came from Hobby Lobby, and so I just cut that out, and then I'm going to adhere it. Once the hot glue is dry, then I adhere it with some Mod Podge, and I take my time and I just take my squeegee and just, make sure that my Mod Podge is, really covering, and I just go around and just, with my foam brush and just put some Mod Podge and just take that squeegee and just form it around the ribs of the pumpkin. The smallest pumpkin in this trio, I'm using one of these pumpkins off of the garland that had the footballs on it from Dollar Tree. I just took off the paper, and what helped me is just taking a wet wipe and laying it over there on top of the pumpkin so that the paper would peel off easier. The paper I'm using is from this paper stack from Hobby Lobby. It's a lot of checks and gingham and, just in fun colors and, really speaks to my heart. So I just cut that out of this orange and white scrapbook paper, and then I'm going to do the same thing with like I did with the other pumpkin, just to make some ribs of the pumpkin. I just took my hot glue gun, the smaller needle nose Surebonder hot glue gun that I got from Hobby Lobby. Works great for projects like this because I can get a very thin line and thicken it up as I want to as I work on my projects. And guys, you know me, I can't stop there. I have to add some distressing and dimension to my pumpkins. So I just have my ink pad. My vintage photo is the color. You can get this at the craft store, or I do have it linked in my Amazon store if you would like to have it shipped to you or get more details. But what I do is I just have a finger dauber. It just fits on my finger, and it just helps with, putting ink on your projects like this. And I just go around to add some dimension, as well as some puffy paint. I have colors orange and I have brown. The orange I'm going to use for the smallest pumpkin, and this just enhances the ribs of the pumpkins. This is just something that I like to do because, I just like to do all the extras, and I am so grateful that the Lord has sent so many sweet friends to my channel that love these type of projects as well. I am so grateful for you that are watching this. All right. So I did the orange, and then now I'm doing the brown, and I just go around the pumpkin just to add dimension and just more character and cuteness to my pumpkins. Adding all of these extras to my projects really just kind of makes me happy, and it's what I do. Just like splattering my projects, and I am so grateful that so many sweet friends love this technique or love this look as well. So guys, this is what I do to splatter my projects. I have some paint and a stiff brush. A toothbrush would work as well, and I just have a stick, just a craft stick, and I just run the stick over the bristles of the stiff brush and pull the stick toward my body so that the paint goes on the project. And I always make sure that I have a placemat or some kind of covering. This right here is just brown paper that I got at Hobby Lobby, and so that my table or my surface is covered. And so I splatter the black paint first, then I make sure that my brush is clean, that it doesn't have any black paint in it, and then I go back and I do the white paint. So then also I'm going to add some shading around the edge of my pumpkin, and I'm just doing that in black. And how I shade is I just take a 1/2 inch flat paintbrush. I dip half of my brush in paint, the other half in clean water, and I blend on a paper towel. I go around my project and just add some shading to the edges of my project. Then to highlight and bring out the dots a bit more, I just have a round brush, and I just go around each of the circles, just adding like a comma or just a swipe just to highlight the polka dots. Then to add more, because guys, y'all know I love to doodle and add squiggly lines and all of that good stuff, because I just really think the beauty is in the details of the projects, especially my painted projects. So I just have a very loved, very thin liner brush that I just go around and just add some squiggles or some doodles. Then I will add some black Sharpie marker, which is my best friend. I do consider my fine Sharpie marker my best friend. So to enhance my project a bit more, like I said, I do take a lot of time and do quite a few steps in my projects, but I do feel that this just adds so much more to my painted projects. So I just go around all of the circles as well as the edges, and just add some black Sharpie marker for some doodling. I do that as well on these smaller pumpkins, just going around, just kind of hitting the high parts. I don't care if my lines are perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. I just want them just to just add a bit of the black color just to give it some doodling and just bring it out. We have to make a cute rustic bow for these pumpkins, so I'm using this burlap from the Dollar Tree. Now for the larger pumpkin, I'm using the orange, and I'm just taking my scissors and just cutting it down a bit more so that I could handle it a little better. And so then I just use my glue gun and just my masking tool to help, because since the burlap has holes in it, I don't want to burn my fingers. So I use that masking tool that I picked up from the Dollar Tree in the makeup section. That works great. And so then I just wrap the stem of the pumpkin with this orange burlap. I just did the same thing with the medium-sized pumpkin, but I used the dark brown burlap from the Dollar Tree. I didn't show that on video, but that's what I did. So then now for the smaller pumpkin, I'm just using the natural color burlap, and I cut that burlap into 3 pieces so that I could work with it a bit better. And so here you can kind of see all 3 of the pumpkins. I used the darker brown on the medium, the orange on the large one, and the natural on the smaller pumpkin. We have to make a cute rustic bow for these pumpkins. So this is one I've already done. I'm going to share how I did it. I just used a bunch of different burlap and strips of muslin. I have some pit berries. I also have some trim. I am using one of the paper covered wires that I got on sale from Walmart a few years ago, but I have since found that they offer them over at Joann's in the crafts section, or the floral section over at Joann's craft store. So if you have one near you, maybe you can find some of these. Okay, so what I have here is I just have different, laces. I cut some burlap. I cut some trim. My trims I get from the Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby or Walmart. And so I'm just kind of layering them up. The pit berries came from Hobby Lobby. And so I am just layering them on kind of like a swag, and to give it a bit of whimsiness, rustic whimsiness, if that's even, a word, I'm just using some sisal twine, and I just did 6 loops, 3 on each side, and I just made a separate bow with the sisal twine, and then that is going to be what's in the middle of my bow. I layer all of that on top, and I just secure everything with a pipe cleaner. I want to make sure that this bow is real secure on this pumpkin, and what I'm using is my crocodile, and I'm using the smaller hole, and I just punched a hole in the pumpkin, and then I threaded the rest of the pipe cleaner through the back, and then I secure it with some glue just to make sure that it's tied on as well as glued on my pumpkin. Okay, so this is how these two look. I just love all the rusticness, and so here I'm going to share another how I made the larger bow, because I do get lots of questions or lots of comments to say, how do you make your rustic bows? So this video is sharing how I made the same bow, but maybe you can pick up different tips from just watching it again. I have the wire, the paper covered wire. I'm using all of the same things, the same trim, the same pit berries and everything. And so here I'm showing how I made the larger one. I just have the pit berries. I turn them, so that some pit berries would be coming out of both sides, and I'm just layering up everything. I have the muslin fabric. It's just fabric that I got at the craft store. I just cut or just tore off 1-inch strips, and then I just have strips of that same burlap that I use to cover the stems of the pumpkins, and just strips of that, and just doing an X pattern. I have all of these different lace trims that I got from either Hobby Lobby, Walmart, Dollar Tree, anywhere that you can get these thin laces, these lace trims from. And then I, am doing the same thing with my sisal twine. I just make a 6-loop bow, 3 loops on each side, and then I secure it with a piece of the little sisal twine so that everything is nice and secure, and that it doesn't come unlooped or together. And so then I just layer everything together and secure it with a pipe cleaner. To attach the pumpkins together, I'm using this Fabri-Tac glue as well as some hot glue just to attach everything together. And for the small little sign, I'm using one of the Happy Fall that came out of this pack from Hobby Lobby. It's already painted orange, which is perfect. And so I just attached that to the sign as well with some of that Fabri-Tac and some hot glue. The Fabri-Tac glue is the permanent hold, and the hot glue is the instant hold. And what I did is I do like to give my painted projects a sealer. I like a glossy finish, so I use this sealer. It is my favorite, and I just brushed it over my projects just to give everything so everything is nice and finished. Here's a quick overview of how I made the wreath. I have a 14-inch gold frame from Dollar Tree, as well as 2 10-inch mesh, my rotary cutter, and some pipe cleaners. So what I do is I just roll these out together. I measure out 12 inches, and then I just cut them all at the same time. Each wreath maker does theirs a little different, but this is just what works for me. And I am cutting 20 bundles of these 2 10-inch mesh. And these 10-inch mesh came from Hobby Lobby. Now, to make my cruffles or my ruffles, I just take it and bend it over 2 times. I clamp it. Those little clamps came from the Dollar Tree. I gather it in the middle to make the ruffle. I clamp it. I do the other one the same way and just fold it over 2 times. I clamp it and then fold the other side. And then I'm going to stack them together. I make an X pattern, and just I like to get all of my ruffles done, and then I use those clamps from the Dollar Tree that I get from the laundry section. They open very wide, and it just helps me with my wreath making for these little things like this. And so then I just take a pipe cleaner, and then I just thread it on and I usually start in the inner ring. I start in the inner ring, and then I move to the outer ring, and I am going to put 20 of these bundles on this frame. Next layer, I am using this 10-inch mesh as well. I consider this specialty mesh. It doesn't quite have as much on the roll. But what I do is I just roll it out, and I'm measuring out 15 inches and cut those out. And that is what I'm going to attach on top of the layers, just to give a bit of this orange and white color. I do this layer the same way, but I'm rolling it over 3 different times since this is a 15-inch mesh, you know, the length of it. And so I just clamp those together, and I like to have like the curls or the ruffles in this, you know, with this specialty mesh. That's just what I call it. That's the color that it gives. And then I just sporadically, I'm going around and I'm just layering this in on top of, you know, the mesh that I already have there. And then I'm going to go around and include this in the entire wreath. So I put a total of 7 of these orange and white cruffles into the wreath. So depending on how much stuff you put on it, depends on how big or how full your wreath is. Okay, these are the ribbons that I'm using. The pumpkins and the brown and white polka dot came from Craft Outlet. The orange with the burlap check came from Hobby Lobby. I measured them out at 13 inches, and I dovetailed all of my ribbons. I almost always dovetail my ribbons. And so to make my bundles, I made 20 bundles, and I use my tiny attacher, my little stapler. You may hear me mention that in a lot of my projects or a lot of my wreath projects. It just helps with, it just makes my wreath making life a little bit easier. It just puts a tiny, tiny little staple in it. And I like to streamline, and I also like to multitask and, kind of like make things a little bit easier for me. Anyway, the tiny attacher is in my Amazon store, or you can buy it at any craft store in the scrapbooking section. I also added some pip berries that I get from Hobby Lobby from the fall section, as well as some raffia. I included that in the ribbon bundles. The raffia is from Walmart. Now, I know I don't show here, but I made 20 of the ribbon bundles, and I just attached them into each of the pipe cleaners. I do have other videos that I share, how I attach my ribbon and that kind of thing, if you would like to check it out. So then what I'm showing here is how I put the cable tie mounts on to my sign. I use a combination of E6000 as well as hot glue. They are sticky, but I don't trust that, so I want to give it extra security and protection. The cable tie mounts, you can use wire or pipe cleaners like I'm using here, and that can help with signs to attach to your wreath. And I just thread pipe cleaners on, and then I attach it to the wire frame so that my sign is secure. I cover the back of my wreaths with these placemats that I get from Hobby Lobby. It's just a personal preference, just to kind of cover up any of the back and just make everything very nice.